Because Vanessa had just made the biggest mistake of her life. For a brief moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Naomi Reed stood perfectly still, her hand slowly rising to her cheek. The sting wasn't just physical. It was the weight of humiliation delivered in front of dozens of strangers. Vanessa crossed her arms, clearly proud of herself. "That's what happens when people forget their place," she muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. A few people looked away in discomfort. Others kept recording, sensing something bigger was unfolding. Naomi took a slow breath. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm and controlled. "I bumped into you by accident," she said. "I apologized. That didn't give you the right to touch me." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, don't act innocent now." That's when a deep, steady voice came from behind the crowd. "Is there a reason you thought it was okay to slap my wife?" Heads turned instantly. A tall black man stepped forward, dressed simply but sharply. His presence alone changed the atmosphere. He wasn't loud. He wasn't angry. But there was authority in the way he stood beside Naomi and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Vanessa looked him up and down and laughed. "Your wife? You should teach her how to walk in public." Naomi looked up at her husband, Daniel Reed, and shook her head slightly, as if to say it's fine. But Daniel had already seen the red mark on her face. He looked back at Vanessa, his eyes steady. "Apologize," he said. Vanessa scoffed. "Or what?" Daniel pulled out his phone. Not dramatically, not threateningly. He typed a short message and slipped it back into his pocket. "Nothing," he replied calmly. "Just consequences." Within minutes, the situation shifted. Mall security suddenly became alert. The store manager rushed over, whispering urgently into a walkie-talkie. More guards appeared, positioning themselves around the scene. Vanessa's confidence began to fade. "What's going on?" she snapped. "Why are you all staring at me?" The mall director arrived, his face pale when he saw Daniel. "Mr. Reed," he said quickly, extending his hand. "We are extremely sorry for what happened to Mrs. Reed." Vanessa froze. "Mrs. Reed?" she repeated slowly. Daniel turned his phone screen toward her. Headlines filled the display. Articles, interviews, net worth estimates. Daniel Reed, billionaire tech investor and philanthropist. Vanessa's face drained of color. "No, this isn't real," she whispered. Naomi finally spoke again, her voice quiet but powerful. "You didn't know who I was," she said. "And that's the point. You treated me the way you did because you thought I was nobody." Vanessa's knees trembled. Her voice broke. I'm sorry," she said desperately. "I didn't mean it. Please, I apologize." But the apology sounded hollow now. Police officers stepped forward to take statements. Shoppers whispered louder. Phones captured every second. Vanessa reached out toward Naomi. "Please don't do this. I'll say anything." Naomi looked at her, not with anger, but with disappointment. "An apology given out of fear isn't regret," she said. "It's panic." Daniel wrapped his arm around Naomi and guided her away as security escorted Vanessa aside. By evening, the video was everywhere. Millions of views. Vanessa's name trended for all the wrong reasons. Her employer released a statement. Sponsors cut ties. Friends went silent. All because she believed one moment of cruelty would go unnoticed. Daniel and Naomi left the mall quietly, hand in hand. Later that night, Naomi said something that would stay with everyone who heard it. Respect shouldn't depend on who someone is, but on the fact that they are human. And that day, the world was reminded of a simple truth. Never mistake silence for weakness. Never confuse status with superiority. And never assume the person you hurt today won't be the one who teaches you a lesson tomorrow. That smirk would disappear very soon. For a brief moment, Daniel Reed said nothing. He looked at his wife's face again, the faint redness on her cheek, the way she stood tall despite the humiliation. Anyone who knew Daniel understood one thing clearly. He was calm only when he was most serious. He turned back to Vanessa, his voice low but controlled. "You don't get to decide what someone deserves," he said. Vanessa laughed sharply. "Oh, please," she replied. "You expect me to apologize because she's your wife?" Daniel stepped slightly closer. Not threatening, not aggressive, just present. The crowd could feel the shift. Conversations stopped again. Even the phones recording seemed to hold their breath. I expect you to apologize because she's a human being, he said. Vanessa scoffed and waved her hand dismissively. People like you are always playing the victim. That's when Naomi finally spoke again. We don't want trouble, she said softly. We just want respect. But respect was something Vanessa had never learned to give freely. Instead, she turned to the growing crowd. Can you believe this? She said loudly. Bumping into people and then crying racism. Murmurs spread through the mall. Some shoppers looked uncomfortable. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone, not in anger, but with purpose. He typed a short message and sent it. Vanessa noticed. What are you doing? She snapped. Making sure this is handled properly, Daniel replied. Within moments, mall security approached more seriously this time. The store manager arrived, followed closely by the mall's operations director. Their expressions changed the instant they saw Daniel. Mr. Reed, the director said, clearly nervous. We were not informed you were on the premises. Vanessa frowned. Mr. Reed, she repeated. Daniel nodded politely. Yes. The director turned to Naomi. And Mrs. Reed, we sincerely apologize for what you experienced today. The words hit Vanessa like a punch. And Mrs. Reed? She stammered. Daniel unlocked his phone and turned the screen toward her. Business headlines filled the display. Interviews, awards, charity events, net worth figures. Daniel Reed, billionaire tech founder. Net worth, $6.2 billion. Vanessa's confidence collapsed instantly. Her lips parted, but no words came out. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear I didn't know. Naomi looked at her calmly. That didn't stop you, she said. You didn't ask who I was before you slapped me. Police officers stepped forward to document the incident. Security asked Vanessa to step aside. The crowd buzzed louder now, realization spreading fast. Vanessa's voice began to shake. Please, she said, her tone completely changed. I'm sorry. I'll apologize publicly. I'll do anything. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at Naomi. I beg you, please don't ruin my life. Naomi paused for a moment. The mall was silent. You didn't think about my life when you humiliated me, she said gently. You thought power belonged to you. Daniel placed his hand over Naomi's. Let the truth handle the rest, he said. As security escorted Vanessa away, her head hung low. The same crowd that had watched her slap Naomi now watched her walk away in shame. Within hours, the video spread across social media. Comment poured in. Companies released statements. Vanessa's name became a warning rather than an identity. Daniel and Naomi left the mall quietly, without interviews or applause. Later that evening, Naomi said something that would echo across millions of screens. Never judge someone by how quiet they are. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It often means strength. In that day, the world learned a powerful lesson. Respect costs nothing. Arrogance costs everything. And the biggest mistakes are often made in moments when we think no one important is watching. Her knees nearly buckled. Vanessa took a step back, her mouth opening and closing as if words were trapped in her throat. The confident posture she had worn moments earlier crumbled in seconds. Her eyes darted around the mall, at the security guards, the manager, the phones recording everything. No, this isn't happening, she whispered. This has to be some kind of joke. Daniel didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was already doing the work for him. The mall director cleared his throat nervously. Ma'am, he said to Vanessa, this incident has been fully documented. Law enforcement has been notified, and our legal department will follow up. Vanessa's voice cracked. Legal department? For one slap. For an assault, the director corrected firmly. And for public harassment. The word assault hit her harder than anything else. She turned back to Naomi, panic flooding her face. I didn't know who you were, she pleaded. If I had known. Naomi interrupted her calmly. If you had known I was rich, she asked. If you had known I was important? Vanessa started to cry. That's not what I meant, she said quickly. I'm not a bad person. I just lost my temper. Naomi looked at her quietly. Temper reveals character, she said. Not status. The crowd murmured in agreement. What had started as shock was now turning into understanding. People weren't just watching drama, they were watching accountability. One of the officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us and make a statement." Vanessa shook her head desperately. "Please," she begged. "I'll apologize. I'll apologize right now." She turned fully toward Naomi and bent slightly forward, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry," she said. "I truly am. Please have mercy." Naomi studied her for a long moment. There was no anger in her eyes, only sadness. "You're asking for mercy now," Naomi said softly, "but you offered none when you felt powerful." Daniel stepped beside his wife. "We won't interfere," he said calmly to the officers. "Let the process be fair." Vanessa sobbed as security escorted her away. The same people who had witnessed her cruelty now watched her leave in disgrace. No insults followed her, just silence. That silence was louder than anything she had said. Within hours, the video flooded social media. Millions watched the slap, the insults, the reveal. Comment sections filled with outrage, reflection, and support for Naomi. By nightfall, Vanessa's employer placed her on immediate suspension. Her business partners released public statements distancing themselves. Longtime friends deleted photos and unfollowed her. One moment of arrogance had erased years of reputation. Daniel and Naomi returned home quietly. No press conference, no interviews, no celebration. Later that evening, Daniel received dozens of calls from executives, politicians, even journalists. He declined them all. Instead, Naomi posted a single sentence online. "Respect should never depend on wealth, race, or recognition." That message reached millions. The next day, Daniel announced a major donation to organizations focused on dignity, justice, and education, not as revenge, but as purpose. When asked privately why he stayed so calm, Daniel answered simply. Anger would have given her power. Truth took it away. And the world learned something important that day. Never assume silence means weakness. Never mistake money for morality. And never believe the person you hurt in public won't have the strength to face you with grace. Because sometimes the biggest mistake isn't the slap itself. It's believing you're untouchable until reality touches back. Reality hit Vanessa like a storm. Her body trembled as if the ground beneath her had suddenly disappeared. The woman who moments ago stood loud and proud now looked small, exposed, and terrified. Her eyes darted from Daniel to Naomi, searching desperately for a way out that no longer existed. I didn't know," she stammered again, her voice breaking. "Please, I'm sorry." Naomi finally spoke again. Her voice was soft, but every word landed with weight. "You weren't sorry when you slapped me," she said quietly. "You weren't sorry when you insulted me." Vanessa swallowed hard. Tears streamed down her face as the reality of the situation settled in. The crowd that once watched her with shock now watched her with judgment. She dropped her designer purse to the floor and reached out helplessly. "Please don't ruin me," she cried. "I have a business, a family. I wasn't thinking." Daniel responded calmly, his tone steady and controlled. "Then you should have thought before humiliating my wife in public." There was no anger in his voice, only truth. Security gently but firmly escorted Vanessa aside as police officers began taking statements. The sound of scribbling pens and quiet radios filled the air. The crowd slowly dispersed, but the damage had already been done. Within hours, the consequences arrived faster than Vanessa could comprehend. Her video spread across social media like wildfire. Millions watched it within a single afternoon. Comments poured in, some angry, some disappointed, some painfully honest. Her business partners released statements distancing themselves from her actions. Sponsors canceled contracts overnight. Clients withdrew their trust. Her name, once associated with success and influence, became synonymous with public racism and unchecked arrogance. Friends stopped answering her calls. Invitations disappeared. Doors that once opened easily were suddenly locked. Vanessa's life unraveled faster than she ever imagined possible. As she was led away by security, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor, she turned back one last time. Her voice was barely louder than a whisper. "I beg you, mercy." Naomi looked at her for a long moment. There was no satisfaction in her expression, no victory, only calm understanding. Then she said something unforgettable. "Mercy is learned when respect is given." Those words hung in the air long after Vanessa disappeared from view. Daniel placed his arm around Naomi and guided her away. They didn't wait for applause. They didn't seek validation. They simply walked out together, hand in hand. That evening, while news channels debated the incident and social media argued over responsibility, Daniel and Naomi sat quietly at home. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked. Naomi nodded slowly. "I am," she said, "because I didn't let her take my dignity." The next morning, Daniel made a decision. Not one driven by revenge, but by principle. He announced a significant donation to organizations focused on education, equality, and dignity. No press conference, no long speech, just action. When a reporter later asked why he stayed silent during the chaos, Daniel replied, "True power doesn't need a shout. It lets consequences speak." Naomi later shared her own reflection, a message that resonated with millions. Never judge someone by how quiet they are. Silence isn't weakness. It's often strength choosing patience. The story slowly faded from headlines, but the lesson remained. Never assume someone's worth by their appearance. Never confuse wealth with humanity. And never believe a moment of cruelty will go unnoticed. Because respect costs nothing, but arrogance can cost everything. And sometimes, the biggest punishment isn't public shame. It's being forced to face the person you were, and realizing it's too late to take it back. Daniel and Naomi walked out of the mall hand in hand. No cameras followed them. No interviews were given. No victory smiles were shared. To them, the moment wasn't about winning. It was about leaving with dignity intact. Outside, the city lights glowed softly as cars passed by, unaware that a life-changing lesson had just unfolded inside those walls. Daniel opened the car door for Naomi, just as he always did. Before getting in, she paused and took a deep breath. "I'm okay," she said quietly, sensing his concern. "I just need tonight to end." Daniel nodded. "It's over now," he said, "and you handled it with grace." That night, while social media exploded with clips, debates, and headlines, Daniel sat in his study reviewing documents. One decision stood out above all others. Without press releases or announcements, he authorized a $2 million donation to organizations fighting racial injustice, supporting education, and promoting dignity. Not for publicity, not for revenge, but for principle. When Naomi learned about it, she didn't smile. "That's how change should be made," she said softly, quietly, purposefully. The next morning, the video had reached millions. Some people were angry. Others were reflective. Many admitted they had seen similar behavior before, sometimes even in themselves. And then Naomi's words appeared online. A single sentence. No hashtags. No explanation. True power doesn't slap back. It lets consequences speak. Within hours, those words were shared everywhere, on news channels, comment sections, and classroom discussions. People paused, reread them, and felt something uncomfortable but necessary. Across the city, Vanessa sat alone in her apartment. The phones that once rang constantly were silent. Emails went unanswered. Messages stopped coming. She stared at the same video everyone else was watching, but this time she saw herself clearly. Not as a victim, not as someone misunderstood, but as someone who had acted without empathy and paid the price. For the first time, she understood something she never had before. Respect isn't demanded. It's earned. Meanwhile, Daniel and Naomi returned to their routine. Morning walks, work meetings, quiet dinners. They didn't let the incident define them, but they knew it would define others. Weeks later, Naomi was invited to speak at a small community event. No cameras, no headlines, just people listening. She ended her talk with words that stayed with everyone in the room. "Don't wait until someone important is watching to behave with kindness," she said. "Character is how you treat people when you believe it doesn't matter." That message traveled farther than any viral clip ever could. The world learned a powerful lesson that day. Never judge someone by their appearance. Never mistake silence for weakness. And never believe wealth, race, or status gives you the right to disrespect another human being. Because sometimes the person you humiliate in public is someone who chooses restraint over revenge. Someone who lets truth do the talking. Someone whose quiet strength changes your entire future. And once that moment passes, once words are spoken, once hands are raised, once dignity is taken, there is no rewind button, no undo, no mercy left to beg for. Only consequences, and the hope that next time, we choose respect first.